Hello and welcome back to the course on Python programming. In today's tutorial, we're going to learn how to create Violinplots, and we will compare them to Boxplots and understand what are the pros and cons. Alright, let's get started. So, as with some things in Seaborn and Python, Violinplots are very straightforward and simple to create. All we have to do is say sns.violinplot, data equals movies, x equals genre, and y equals critic rating. Voila, Violinplot is ready, as quick as that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to copy that, and it's before, because we've already talked about Boxplots, so we'll just put it above, let's say W, and here we're going to replace Violinplot with Boxplot because the function call is exactly the same. You run that, there's your Boxplot, or our Boxplot. And so if I zoom out a bit, let's have a look and try to see what they're telling us. So we've got genre at the bottom, our 7 genres. We've got action, adventure, comedy, drama, horror, romance, and thriller. And here we've got the critic rating. So how is the critic rating distributed across, differently across the different genres? What does Boxplot tell you? Boxplot tells you, all right, so that's that's first quartile, that's your second quartile, middle, that's your third quartile, that's your top, right? And any outliers are excluded. So here we don't see the outliers, they're usually specified as separate dots. And so here, for instance, you can see that in horror movies, the critic ratings are generally lower. The median here is about 22, and generally, so it's the lowest median that you have out of all of them. And the highest median you've got for thrillers. Somehow thrillers are getting the best critic ratings according to these box plots. Not always, but generally speaking, the median here is much higher. Then here you've got two similar box plots. You've got comedy and drama, just drama is a bit higher than comedy. So you can kind of tell that, let's say, hypothetically, if you're creating a movie and you create an average type of movie, so you don't have a very great idea for the movie, the plot isn't, it's kind of, everything's about average, the budget is average, everything is average, then which is the best type of movie to create? If you create a horror movie, then you are more likely than not to end up over here with a 25 out of 100 critic rating. If on the other hand you create a thriller, you are more likely than not to have a 65 or 70 out of 100 critic rating. So basically, all else being equal, if you're creating an average type of movie without anything unique or special about it, then it's better to create a thriller than a horror movie. That's kind of like a very quick and rough or rugged insight out of this chart of Boxplots. Just an example of how you would use Boxplots, but definitely you can get more insights out of here, especially if you want to compare two different genres side by side. So if you want to compare action versus comedy, you can see that their median is quite about the same, but the Boxplot for comedy is a bit more stretched out than for action. And what does that mean? It's more likely that you will be further away from the median in the comedy, whereas here it's a bit more compact. So the Violinplot tells us pretty much the same thing, but it has a bit different characteristics. For example, here you can see the width, and the width tells you the number of points that fall into that certain area, something you can't see from the Boxplot. Boxplot kind of tries to tell you that through the quartiles, so it tries to split up your data into quartiles. So basically, looking at Boxplot, you would know that between here, this point and this point, there's about a quarter of the observations. You'll find a quarter of the observations. Then between here and here, you'll find a quarter of observations, here and here another quarter, and here another quarter. So basically, this part is longer, but it contains the same amount of observations as this part, meaning that there's more observations here. Well, a Violinplot shows you the same thing, but it shows it to you in a bit more of a visual manner. So instead of trying to remember that when the part is smaller, that means more dots fall in there, more observation, you can actually see by the width. You can see that the width is telling you that there's more observations that can be found here. Same thing, more observations here than in the top part, which you can also tell from the Boxplot. And then here you can see that this is a bit of a tricky one. Here it's wider, and it's wider again, whereas that's not something you can really tell from the Boxplot. you can't really tell that there's a concentration of points here in the middle. So sometimes Violinplots do tell you a bit more. And in fact, I had a specific example. It took me a while to find it, and it will show us that Boxplots or Violinplots can be a bit better than Boxplots sometimes. So let's have a look at it. All right, it is in the drama section. So if I'm going to take this and change it a bit, so I'm going to say movies, but I'm not going to take all of movies. I'm just going to filter them out. So I'll say movies where genre equals drama. Let's do that same thing here. So basically we're filtering our data set, we're subsetting it. But okay, so here I want to change this by year. So we're going to split it by year instead of by genre. Let's copy that and remove that again here. Then I'm going to zoom in quickly. So basically what I did is I'm creating a box plot for this subsetted dataset, which only contains movies in drama. And then instead of genre, I'm going to have the years on the x-axis, and still I'm going to look at critic rating. Just let me quickly check that that's the one I want to be looking at. Yep, that's the one we want to be looking at, critic rating. So let's zoom out. Same thing for the Violinplot. So if I run that and I run that. So what can we see from these two, comparing these two? Well, let's have a look at this box plot and the green box plot, right? So even though the green box plot is a bit more stretched out, they look very similar, right? So apart from that fact that it's been more stretched out, these two box plots look very similar. But when you look at the Violinplots, you'll see that they're a bit different. So here you can see that it's smooth, it goes up and then it goes down. There's a bit of a hiccup over here, but generally it's quite smooth. This Violinplot on the other hand is very different. It's got two wider areas, so wide here and wide here. So you can see that there's an evident concentration of points at this part, at this critic rating and at this critic rating. Whereas here, there's one evident concentration of points. And that is interesting. So that is something that Violinplots can show you better than Boxplots, is those symmetrical type of concentration. So when you have a concentration of points above and below, in a box plot, it kind of evens out. It kind of, as long as it's above and below the median, it kind of evens out. It doesn't pull the median up or down or anywhere. Whereas in a Violinplot, you can actually see it. So this is a very faint example of that phenomenon, but you will definitely, if you keep practicing with Violinplots in your own datasets, you will eventually come across an example where a Violinplot can potentially give you much more insightful analytics than a box plot. At the same time, why aren't Violinplots that used in analytics and in reports? Well, because box plots are a favorite of executives. Executives really like, for some reason, box plots. They're quite straightforward to understand. It's quartiles. So once you get your head around the fact that when it's longer, that means when it's shorter, that means there's more density in there. Once you get your head around that, it is pretty straightforward to use them. Whereas Violinplots, they do have these weird shapes. And not in all programming languages, it's as easy as in Python or as in Seaborn to create the Violinplots. So there you go. Now we've had a bit of a comparison between Boxplots and Violinplots, and hopefully you can understand for yourself which ones you like more and which ones you would rather include in your reports. And that's all for today's tutorial. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy coding!